Again today the Gemara on Daf Mem Aleph from Aleph, 5 lines from the top of the Yamud, where it says Rabbi Eliezer my taima. So this is the middle of Inyan here. The Gemara before brought a Mishnah from Masechta Negayim that speaks about the halacha of teglachas regarding a mitzayda. And in that Mishnah it says that by mitzayda we know for sure that in that Mishnah actually it says that by mitzayda we don't have any source that the teglachas has to be with a tar. And the Mishnah tries to learn it out, maybe from Nazir or from Levium or both together. But then the Gemara brought from another brayse before where it says the exact opposite. There's a brayse where it says that no, by mitzayda we have a clear source. We don't have to learn out mitzayda from anywhere. So that's the discussion of the Gemara here. The teglachas by a mitzayda, which is the halacha of a teglachas of a mitzayda when he's done with his tzaras, and it has to be with a tar. Is that something that we see clearly in the Torah by mitzayda itself, or do I have to learn it out from Nazir or from somewhere else? So before the Gemara explained that according to the Rabbanon, by mitzayda itself I have a source that it has to be with a tar, with a razor. What's the source? Because it says zakonai. Why does it have to spell out zakonai? When it talks about cutting all the hair from the body of the mitzayda, it says kol sa'arai. So why does it spell out zakonai? Because there's a lav to cut off a beard. And the lav to cut off a beard, according to the Rabbanon, is dafka with a razor. So the Torah is telling you that the mitzayda should still cut off his beard. So from that I see that the mitzayda has to cut off his beard with a razor. If it's not with a razor, so then it doesn't have to say it especially. He's not being over any issa of cutting off the beard. So Bekitzer, according to the Rabbanan, the fact that by the mitzayda it says zakonai shows that he has to cut all the hair of his body with a razor.
What about it says in the pasuk also reishay?
That's what we're coming to now. Coming to that now. That's going to be the main discussion today. So now the question is, according to Rabbi Eliezer, what's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? Rabbi Eliezer holds that when it comes to cutting the beard, the isser is not only with a razor. The Gemara before brought, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, the isser is even with a malkit or a hitni, using other kinds of utensils, whatever it's called. I think it's called a plane or these carpenter tools. So if according to Rabbi Eliezer, the isser of cutting the beard is not with a razor, so when the Torah writes that a mitzayda should cut the beard, you can't say that it's writing it, and that from there you learn out that a mitzayda has to cut with a razor. Because the whole issue to cut the beard is even without a razor. So now the question is, according to Rabbi Eliezer, what's the source that when a mitzayda has to cut all the hair from his body, that it has to be dafke with a razor? That's what we're focusing on here now. Okay, let's see inside. Now, but Rabbi Eliezer, my time, according to Rabbi Eliezer, what's his source to say that by a mitzayda you have to cut all the hair and it has to be dafke with a tar, with a razor? So the answer is Yalef Miraishai. He learns it out from this that the Torah says by a mitzayda that he should cut off the hair of his head. And again, it's extra because it says Kol Sa'areh, that is to cut all the hair of his body. Why does it have to say separately Raishai that he cuts the hair from his head? So now this is going to teach us from here. We're going to see that it has to be dafka with a razor, as Gemara will explain here. Tanya and a brayse we learned Raishai when it says by the mitzayda that he has to cut the hair from his head. Why does the Torah have to say this? If it already says he cuts all the hair from his body, so lefi shenema, the answer is, what happens if this mitzayda is also a nazir, and a nazir is not allowed to cut any hair from his head? So lefi shenema gabi nazir, because by a nazir it says tar lo yaver al Raishai, that he's not allowed to cut any hair from his head with a razor. Yochalav nazir mitzayda kain. So I would think that a nazir that's also a mitzayda, and he's completing his tzaras. So now he has to cut the hair from his body. So I would think that for him it's also a isra to cut the hair from his head with a razor. Tamad loy ma Raishai. So therefore it says Raishai that this mitzayda, which is also a nazir, does cut the hair from his head, and even with a razor. Okay, so just a few things to clarify Pshat in the Gemara here. First of all, this Gemara is going according to the opinion that says that the Isser of a Nazir, to cut the hair from his head or from his body, is only with a razor. If you remember, before in the Gemara, there was other opinions that said that when it says Lo Yavoid, or it says other psukim that you learn out, that the Isser of a Nazir to cut his hair is lav dafka with a razor, even by hand or even in other ways. But this Gemara here is going according to the Mandama that says that it's dafka with a razor. That's number one. Number two, the point that the Gemara is saying over here is similar to what it said before, according to the Rabbanan, that because the Torah has to write especially the word Raishai to say that a mitzayda, which is also a nazir, cuts the hair from his head, that means that the mitzvah of a mitzayda to cut his hair is dafka with a razor. If it wasn't dafka with a razor, It doesn't have to tell me that even a Nazir cuts his hair. Because true, the Nazir is not allowed to cut his hair, but that's only with a razor. The Mitzayre does the mitzvah to cut the hair from his head without a razor. So the fact that it has to especially say Reishai teaches me that by a Mitzayre he must cut his hair with a razor. Okay, but it comes out though, the point here is that according to Rabbi Eliezer, the source that a Mitzayre cuts the hair from his head with a razor really comes from Nazir. That once you know by a Nazir that he's not allowed to cut his hair with a razor, from that I learn out to Mitzayre. According to the Rabbanan that we brought before, he's not learning out Mitzayre from Nazir. Mitzayre, separately, without Nazir. Mitzayre because it says Zakanai, which is related to the Isser of Bachlal cutting the beard. So that's the two opinions that's related to the Mishnah and the Braise that the Gemara quoted before. But now, the Gemara is going to ask a very similar question, basically the same question, that it asked before according to the Rabbanan. Now, how do you know that this word Reishai tells you that a Mitzayre must cut all the hair of his body, dafka with a razor? And that's why it had to say Reishai, that even the Nazir cuts the hair from his head. Dilma, maybe I could still say, the Mitzayre, when he has to cut the hair from his body, he can do it with another utensil, and the mitzvah is done. Why does the Torah have to write the word Reishai, which indicates that it has to be done dafka with a razor? It doesn't mean dafka. Lememre, it comes to say, or as other Rishonim Magoyres here, or lemishre, it's coming to say that it's allowed, meaning da'afilabitar, that you're allowed to cut with a razor. Not that you must cut with a razor, but you're allowed. I would think that since a Nazir that cuts any hair of his body with a razor, say it's chayiv malchus, so therefore gab mitzayre naimel l'chayiv. This Nazir that's now a mitzayre, if he cuts the hair of his body with a razor, he should also be chayiv. Kamash malon delay. So the pasuk writes Reishai that if he's going to cut the hair of his body for this mitzvah with a razor, he's not going to be chayiv. But the point is, maybe it's only coming to give a heter, that he's allowed to cut the hair with a razor. How is this a source that he must cut the hair dafka with a razor? So the Gemara gives the same answer that it gave before. Before the Gemara actually gave two answers to this question. Here the Gemara gives one of those answers. So the Gemara says, no, Isal kedaitach, if you're going to say that ki ovid, the malket berehitni mitzvah ka ovid, that if a person cuts his hair with a malket or a hitni with these utensils, that the mitzvah is done. Why? Meduloi kosav tar, because the Torah never writes clearly that it must be with a razor. Rather, the Torah just wrote Reishai. And you're going to say that Reishai is just a heter, that he's allowed to cut with a razor. But you're going to say that he doesn't have to cut with a razor. He can do the mitzvah even by using another utensil. If that's the case, then I'll tell you, Kiresh Lakish, that you have to apply here the rule of Rish Lakish. What's the rule of Rish Lakish? The Gemara quoted it before in the beginning of the Yamud. Rish Lakish says, anytime you have a situation where there's a mitzvah and a loisesa, and you have the possibility to do both the mitzvah and not be oiva and a loisesa at the same time, you have to do it that way. So you can't tell me that he has an option to do it with a malkit and a hitni, but if he does it with a tar, that he's not going to be over the Isser. If you have an option to do it without a tar, without a razor, you're going to have to do it with a malkit or hitni. There's no such a thing as a heter in a situation where there's a lav. So therefore, it must be that when the Torah writes Reishai, it's coming to say that you must do it with a razor, and even a mitzayre, again, a mitzayre, which is a nazir, also has to do it with a razor. Even though usually by a nazir there's an issa to cut his hairs with a razor. Okay, so we have two different sources by a mitzayre that his hair has to be cut with a razor, either from the word zakanai or from the word reishai, according to Rabbi Eliezer. So now the Gemara asks, V'Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, Hai Reishai Mai Darshibe, what do they learn out from the word reishai? Since the Rabbanan already know this halacha that from zakanai, from the extra word zakanai, you learn out that he has to cut his hairs with a razor. So what do they learn from the word reishai? Answers the Gemara, according to the Rabbanan, they need the word Reishai lemitchi lav da kofet to tell you that the mitzvah of the mitzayre to cut all the hair of his body pushes off the lav of a kofet, the lav of not cutting off the payas. The Tanya, as the Braisa says, lo yisakifu pas reishchem, when the Torah says you're not allowed to cut off the payas from your head, yochalaf mitzayre kain. I would think this applies to a mitzayre as well, that has a mitzvah to cut all the hair in his body. Talmud leima Reishai. So the Torah says, Reishai, that he's not allowed to that the mitzayre is obligated to cut off the hair from his head. Basically, this halacha here is teaching me the basic halacha that we find in many places, that the essa of the mitzayre to cut all the hair of his body pushes off the loisesa of not cutting your pace. The Gemara asks on this, according to the Rabbanon, Why do I need this drasha from Roshai? Lama lila michtav Roshai. V'teipek mizakanai. Can't they learn out the same exact thing from zakanai? Zakanai is also allowed not to cut the beard. And by a mitzayda, according to the Rabbanan, we learn out that he does have to cut his beard. The Tanya, the Brais says, we've quoted this before already. It says in the Brais, zakanai matamad loima. Why does the Torah have to write by a mitzayda that he cuts his beard? The fisha nemar upe'asa kanam lo yigalechu, that you're not allowed to cut the hair from the beard. Yachalaf mitzayda can, I would think by mitzayda as well, he's not allowed. Tamad loimar zakanai. So the Torah says, no, the mitzayda has to cut his beard. So the question now is, lama li lemichtav Roshai? According to the Rabbanan, why does the Torah have to write Roshai that the mitzayda cuts off his payas? And v'lam li lemichtav zakanai. And why does it have to say that he cuts off his beard? It's both the same point, that the essa, the mitzvah to cut off all the hair by a mitzayda pushes off the lav of cutting the payas and the lav of cutting the beard. So the Gemara answers, Tzrichi, I need both Roshai and Zakanai. They both teach me something else. Because the Kazav Rachman is Zakanai, if the Torah would only say that the Mitzayda has to cut off his beard, V'loik Kazav Roshai, and it wouldn't say that he cuts off the hair of his head. So Hava Mineh, I would think to say, Hakofas Kol Roish Loishma Kofa. That this Torah Mitzayda has to cut off all the hair of his body, because it already says Kol Sa'are, and he has to cut also the hairs from his head. So the reason why he's allowed to cut off all his payas is because since he's shaving the entire hair of all of the hair of his head, that doesn't go into the issa of cutting off your payas. The issa of cutting off your payas is only if the person leaves all the hair of his head and he's cutting off his payas. What happens then is, it's called mashvet dov la'achayrav, that the side, the payas in front of the ear and the hair behind behind the ear becomes equal, and the rest of the hair on your head is still there. Then is when the issur of cutting off your payas applies. But if he shaves all the hair off his head, maybe then the issur of payas doesn't apply. That's what I would say. So if the Torah wouldn't specify clearly Roshai, I would say that I can't learn from here the nature of the lav of cutting off your payas. So therefore the Torah writes the word Roshai. What is it coming to tell me? You should know that when the Mitzayda shaves all the hair of his body, and he shaves all the hair on his head, we're now pushing off the lav of cutting your payas. And from this we now understand that the lav of cutting the payas includes even when you shave all the hair of your head. So in other words, the main chiddush that we're learning out from here is not the fact that he has the mitzvah to cut off all the hair on his head, because that we would have known anyways, and the fact that it pushes off the lav of cutting your payas, we would have known anyways, because you learn it out from zakanai, from this that it pushes off the lav from the beard. But I wouldn't know from here the chiddush that the pshat in the lav of cutting off the payas means even when you shave all the hair on your head. By the Torah writing Roshai, so it's specifying that you should even cut off the payas in such a situation when you shave all the hair on your head. That shows you that the issur of cutting off your payas is even in a situation when you're shaving all the hairs on your head. So that's why it's specified Roshai. On the other hand, vi kasav Roshai, if the Torah, what?
That's why it says Kanai.
That's why it says Roshai. No, that's why it says Roshai. That's why it says Roshai. Now, v'i kasav Roshai. On the other hand, if the Torah would have only written Roshai to say that you push off the lav of the payas, v'loi kasav zakanai, and it wouldn't specify that you cut off, that the mitzayda cuts off the beard as well. So then, hava minna, I would say, mashma tarti. So true, it already teaches me 2 points. First of all, it teaches me the asiyasa v'dachiyas loisasa, that the mitzvah saseh of the mitzayda to cut off all his hairs pushes off the loisasa of cutting off the beard. And, or cutting off the payas rather, that is, right? Because right now the Gemara is saying that it would have just said Roshai. So I would already know that the mitzvah saseh pushes off the lav of cutting off the payas. And also umashma, I would also learn out from here the second point that the Gemara said before, the hakofas kolareish shma kofa, that even when he's shaving the entire hair of his head, including his payas, that's also the issur of cutting off your payas. And that's why the Torah has to specify Roshai, that you're allowed to cut off the payas over here. So l'chayre, if the Torah would write Roshai, I already know both of these points. Why does it have to write Zakanai? Says the Gemara, but now we come back to the earlier point that the Rabbanan said, Va'akati betar minalon. However, I would not yet know that the halacha of a mitzayda to cut off all the hair of his body is dafka with a razor. From where did the Rabbanan learn out that it has to be dafka with a razor? From the extra word Zakanai. Why? So as the Rishonim explain over here, the issur to cut the hairs from the beard and the issur to cut off the payas is different. The issa to cut off the payas is not necessarily only with a razor. If you cut off the payas close enough to the skin, even without a razor, so then you're over on the issa. By the issa of cutting off the beard, that's dafka with a razor. So in order to have a source that by the mitzayre, the chiyuv, the mitzvah, to cut off the hairs of the mitzayre is dafka with a razor, that I could only learn out from zakonai. The fact that the Torah has to especially tell me that he should cut off his beard as well, that means that he's using a razor. Otherwise, it wouldn't have to say that specially that he has to do so. If it would only say Reishai, so then the issa of cutting off the payas is lav dafka with a razor. So I would have no source to say that by a mitzayre it has to be with a razor. So that's why the Torah had to write Zakonai, since according to the Rabbanon, Zakonai is the source that it has to be done dafka with a razor. Okay, now the Gemara has a question according to Rabbi Eliezer. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the Osi es v'dochi es loisas. This idea that a esse is doicha aloisas minole. From where does he learn this out? So the simple taita, what the Gemara is saying is according to the Rabbanon. So the Rabbanon say you learn out from the word roishai to say that the esse is doicha the loisas. The mitzvah say of mitzayre is doicha the loisas of cutting off your payas. So that's the source for esse doicha loisas, right? But the shaila is according to Rabbi Eliezer, where do you have a source that esse is doicha loisas? Okay, but all the Rishonim ask on this, Taisus over here, and all the Rishonim ask on this, what do you mean? According to Rabbi Eliezer, we don't have a source that es is deichel loisasa. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer, you also learn out from Roishai and from Zakonai to say that you're going to be deiche and that es is deichel loisasa. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer, we learn out from Roishai to say that you push off the lav of cutting off the pace. No? Mm-hmm. Same thing, and also from Zakonai. And in fact, Taisus points out, and here this is actually the key of understanding the Gemara according to one pshat and Taisus, that by Roishai and Zakonai, so it's actually a esse and a loisese. By Zakonai, or at least by Zakonai, not sure about Roishai, but by Zakonai, there's a lav, not to cut off the beard, and by the Kainim over there it says also a esse, that he's not allowed to cut off the beard. So if so, you even see more. According to Rabbi Eliezer, not only do we see from here that a esse is doicha loisese, but you actually see from here that a esse is doicha loisese and an aseh. That's how strong this esse of mitzayre is. It's doicha the isse of cutting off the beard, which is a esse and a loisese. Okay, so there's a few pshatim here in Taisus. It's not so pashut how to understand this Gemara. What does the Gemara want over here when it's asking this question? According to Rabbi Eliezer, what's the source that esse is doicha loisese? So one pshat Taisus says is that according to Rabbi Eliezer, you take to see that the esse of mitzayre, to cut off all the hairs by mitzayre, is doicha a esse and a loisese. It's doicha both. It's doicha the lav of the beard, which is a esse and a loisese. But you don't have a source for esse doicha loisese, just being doicha loisese alone. Meaning, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the Gemara is saying that there has to be another source from another place to say that esse is doicha loisese. And because we have already another source that esse is doicha loisese, so over here in this pasuk we're learning out an even bigger chiddush b'negei to Zakonai, that a esse is doicha a esse and a loisese. And regarding Roishai, what do we learn out by Roishai? We learn it out according to Rabbi Eliezer b'negei to a Nazir, by a Nazir. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the chiddush regarding Roishai was regarding a Nazir, and by a Nazir it's also a esse and a loisese. So again, the point over here is that according to Rabbi Eliezer, both Roishai and Zakonai, that it says by mitzayre, is coming to teach me that the mitzvah saseh of mitzayre is doicha sai esse and a loisese, because both by Roishai, which is a case of a Nazir, it's a esse and a loisese, and by Zakonai, not cutting the beard, is a esse and a loisese. So one second. So the Gemara's question is, why, according to Rabbi Eliezer, are we saying that Roishai and Zakonai is coming to teach me such a big chiddush, that the esse of mitzayre is doicha both, the esse and a loisese? What's with the more basic thing? Why didn't he want to say, like the Chachamim, that it comes to teach me that esse is doicha loisese? According to the Chachamim, it's telling you that it doesn't push off, that it does push off the lav of the payas. The lav of the payas is only a loisese. So therefore, according to the Chachamim, from here we have a source that esse is doicha loisese, the lav of the payas. According to Rabbi Eliezer, no, we're not learning out the lav of the payas from here. From here we're learning out b'negei to a Nazir. that a Mitzayre, that's a Nazir, that he has to cut off the hairs from his head. And we're learning out from here regarding the beard. Both a Nazir and a beard is a Esa and a Lois Esa. It's a much bigger Chiddush. So if he's learning out a much bigger Chiddush from here, from where does he know the basic halacha of Esa Deicha Lois Esa? That's the Taich of the Gemara. Oh, 1 second. So your question is, it's a Kal V'Chaimer, right? So Taisa says, it's not a Kal V'Chaimer. The reason is, because what's Taka the Pshat in this? What's the reason why you say that the Esa of Mitzayre is Deicha Esa and a Lois Esa? It doesn't make any sense. Why should it be Deicha Esa and a Lois Esa? The answer is because both the Esa and the Lois Esa of a Nazir and the Esa and the Lois Esa of a beard is called a Esa and a Lav She'einu Shava B'Koil. It's not a very strong Esa and a Lois Esa because the Nazir is not Shava B'Koil. It only applies to a Nazir. And by a beard, it's written only by a Kohen, or even more than that, it's only by a man and not by a woman. So over there, we say that it's Leicha Esa and a Lois Esa. So in a way, it is a bigger chiddush, but you can't learn out from here to other places. But the Gemara still wants to know, according to Rabbi Eliezer, that says that we're not learning out over here, benigeh to the basic din, that Esa Deicha Lois Esa regarding the payis. So from where does he learn out this din of Esa Deicha Lois Esa? That's the first pshat in Taisus over here. Taisus has another few pshatim, the Rishonim have other pshatim, but this is one pshat here in the Gemara.
But so it says, according to Lezer, it says it's close to early, it's Reshi, it's Zikana, and so on.
Right.
So by for us to kind of, by according to him, he doesn't hold that if you cut only if you leave the hair. Our issue was leaving the hair and cutting the payas. That's usher. But if you cut the whole head, according to those, it means you're allowed to cut over here. And
that's we're not learning that out from here. Correct. According to Rabbi Eliezer,
that would be mutter.
That's the mitzvah. That's the mitzvah of mitzayra. According to Rabbi Eliezer, we don't need this pasuk of Roshai that it says that he's allowed to cut off his payas. You don't need that b'chlal. Must be he learned it out from somewhere else. The cutting off the payas is only a lav. And the mitzvah say of mitzayra, so that's a Esa Deicha Lois Esa. For some reason, according to Rabbi Eliezer, the pasuk Roisha that it says by mitzayra is not needed to teach me that the Esa of mitzayra is Deicha the Lav of Payas. That's what the Gemara is trying to understand. Why? According to Rabbi Eliezer, Roisha is coming to tell me a bigger chiddush, that the mitzvah say of mitzayra is Deicha the Isser by a Nazir, and by a Nazir it's a Esa and a Lois Esa. And by Zukana, it's also a Esa and a Lois Esa. But what happened with the more basic thing? Why didn't you want to learn like the Chachamim, which say that we're coming to teach you that you can cut off the payas, which is a Esa, the Lois Esa. Must be that he learned it out from somewhere else already. Yeah. So that's why we don't need Reisha over here. That's the Gemara Shaila. Let's just finish the Indian and then 1 second. So the Gemara answers. Yalef mi gedilem. From where did Rabbi Eliezer learn out this halacha of Esa Deicha Lois Esa that we find in all of Torah? He learns it out from Gedilim, which is a lashon that the pasuk says by tzitzis. The Tanya, the Brais, it says lesil bashatnis. So the Torah writes together. First it writes the lav not to wear shatnis, wool and linen together in a garment, and then it says after that ha Gedilim. Where's the Bach Goydes over here? What? It's Sema Pishtim Yachtov, and then but I learn out from this, Gedilim Tasalachamehem. However, in the same pasuk it also says that Gedilim, which is tzitzis, that you could make from shatnez itself. That's why it writes it in the same pasuk. So shatnez, the fact that you can make shatnez from tzitzis, means that Esas Deicha Lois Esa. This is the source. You had this in the Gemara in Yevamos. Actually, if you look there in the Gemara in Yevamos, there it says that everybody holds, even the Chachamim hold, that this is really the source of Esa Deicha Lois Esa. When you finish our Gemara, it comes out that according to the Rabbanon, the source of Esa Deicha Lois Esa is from the fact that the mitzvah of the mitzvah to cut his hair is Deicha de La'av of cutting off the payas. And according to Rabbi Eliezer, the source is by tzitzis. That tzitzis is Deicha de La'av of shatnez. So this is another big discussion here in Taisvis and the Rishonim, that in the Gemara and Yevamos it's mashma that according to everybody they learn it out from tzitzis and shatnez and not from the tzayra and the payas. Okay.
So according to the